Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Today we have with us Mr. Subhrajyoti Sen. He is one of Google developer experts. As someone who has worked in the industry since the last 6 years, he is here with us to share his experience and expertise with us. He has worked at several companies, led many teams, and also has great experience in mentoring people. Mr. Subhrajyoti, we are really grateful to you that you are here with us. This being said, I'd like to hand over the session to you.
Thanks, Piyush. Thanks for the introduction as well. So, hi everyone, and thanks for joining in on the session. So, uh, since there's already an introduction, I won't repeat anything. Uh, Today we'll be learning basics of Kotlin. How do you do like general programming Kotlin, and then we'll look at how you can start using Android Studio and create a simple app with buttons and images and some text. So let's get started. I'll share my screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes,
Let me
it's
know if it
visible.
isn't. Okay. So I'm not going to use any slides or any presentation. It's mostly just going to be hands-on coding. So first thing I would suggest is go to this URL. If you're on your laptop, play.kotlin.org. Uh, Let me try increasing the font size if that helps. Good. Yeah. So this is just an online playground for the Kotlin compiler. You can test out different programs here. You can't do too advanced things, but you can just test out, like if you're learning Kotlin or if you just want to, execute a snippet of code, you can go ahead and do this here. So first question would be, why Kotlin? There are so many languages, and why not just continue using Java like they used to do for Android? The thing is, Java is still good, but there are lots of things Kotlin does better. We'll take a look at a few small things where Kotlin does much better. But overall, Kotlin is a more developer-friendly language. And the people who made Kotlin thought of developers in mind, saw what are the pain points they had with different languages. They learned from different languages and then developed Kotlin. So Kotlin uses good things of Java, good things of maybe languages like C Sharp and a bunch of other things. So the good things that you see in other languages most likely are in Kotlin. And Kotlin can be used for a bunch of things now. You can do Android apps. You can write desktop apps in Kotlin now. You can write some part of iOS apps in Kotlin. Now, recently, they have started, I think, supporting a bunch of things for data science as well. So Kotlin has become a very general purpose programming language, and it's very easy to learn. And the biggest advantage is that it also compiles down to bytecode, which Java also does. So Kotlin can easily make use of anything you already have written in Java. So if you are writing an Android app and you have some classes in Java, Kotlin can very easily interact with Java code as well. And for the most part, code compiled by Kotlin can also be used by Java. So it's the interop between these two languages is very easy. So let's start with Kotlin, like the very basics of it. Whenever you're writing something in a regular Kotlin, I would say Kotlin program, you would need to have this main function. So here main is the name of the function, and the word keyword fun means that this is a function. So anytime you write a function, you will use the keyword fun and then use the name of the function. In this case, you need to have a main function because that is the entry point of the program. So anything that you execute will start from main. We'll also see how you can define different other functions, call those functions later on. So this is the general structure of a method here. Now, the first thing you do in uh, something like any program is you print hello world. If you've written Java, this will be pretty familiar to you. You use this method called print, and you print whatever you want in this. You can compile this code using this blue run button here. So let's just click it and see if this program compiles. It did. So here, whatever you give inside hello world, this will be printed out as it is. Now let's try putting hello and world on different lines. You can see that it still writes it in the same line. Let me just add an extra space to make it clear. Yeah, even though we wrote the print statements in different lines, they still got output in the same line, one after the other. If you have written Java, you might already know why this happens. Because whenever you use print, it doesn't care how many lines you're writing or how you're distributing it. It will just start printing from wherever it stopped last. So in the first print, it stopped here, hello, space, and then it stopped. So next, it comes to world. So it just continues printing there. So you get hello world. What you can do in such a scenario, you can use these things called escape characters. So it will be a backslash followed by a character. Now, when you write, for example, this backslash n, this won't be printed as it is. Here, the compiler will figure out that you have a backslash, so you're most likely using something special. And here it will look for slash n, so it looks for the character after the slash. Here slash n tells the compiler that go to the next line. So let's try executing this. You can see that we printed hello, we came to the next line, and then we printed world. There's a simpler way of doing this as well. You can remove this. Instead of using break, you can use print ln. Let's execute this. You can see that this still prints hello and then comes to world on the next line. Print ln is just saying print a line. And once you finish printing a line, it automatically goes to the next line. So when print ln finishes executing, it'll just go to the new line and then print will continue printing from wherever it left off. Let's try adding another println here. Let's see what happens. You can see that there is a blank line in between. That's because even though we didn't print anything, what println understood that is it's not supposed to print anything, but then you're saying that it's printing a line. So irrespective of whatever you give inside println, it'll try printing it and then coming to the next line. So this is just Gradle, how you output information. Now, for example, let's say you don't want this print statement to execute. Of course, you can just remove the piece of code. It won't execute. But what if you want to keep the piece of code and just not execute it? You can comment it out by 2 forward slashes. What this does is it tells the compiler that whatever you find in this line, just ignore it. You can see that this print statement got ignored. Now, it's not just to always, I would say, remove code, but you can also write some comments about the program. For example, you want to write that this or these lines of code will print hello world. It's an explanation of what the code is doing, but then the compiler will completely ignore this. You can see that these didn't have any effect. Now, you might not always have just such one simple one-line comments. You can have multi-line comments as well. When you see, I would say, professional software, you will see that comments go into multiple lines. We'll take a look at some examples later on. So let's try running multi-line comments. Hello world. This is a multi-line. Am I messing this up? Okay. Yeah. So I used a forward slash with 2 asterisks, and then I stopped with 2 asterisk forward slash. You can see that here it's a multi-line comment, but even this got ignored as well. So anytime you want to add an explanation for your code, you can use comments. And you should always try writing comments so that anyone else who reads your code understands it. Or if you read your code 2-3 months down the line, you should be able to understand what you have written. You might think that you will always understand it, but that's not always the case. So this is just about how you print a few things, how you ignore a few things. Let's get rid of this. Now let's see how you can define values. Now Kotlin has a different way of defining values. It thinks of two things. One is mutable and one is immutable. Anything that is mutable means that you can change it, and immutable means you cannot change it. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say you have someone's age. Right. Now age can keep varying, right? So we will use the keyword var. Var tells Kotlin that this particular value can change over time. So let's say I to age equal to 11. Maybe after a year, the person had another birthday, the age changed. Right. Let's try executing this code. It didn't do anything because we're not asking it to print anything. Let's try printing it as well. Now, whenever you want to print the value of something, you have to use this dollar symbol, and then you have to use the name of the value that you used. You can see that this prints 11. And you can keep changing it how many, like what times you want. Like I can be 21. And you can see that it takes up the latest value. That's because age is something that can change. But a person's name is very unlikely to change. I mean, people do change their name. Sometimes there's spelling mistakes and things like that. But you can think of something that's unlikely to change. So if something is unlikely to change, we use the keyword val. Right. Now let's consider that we are assuming age never changes. So first we assign the age to 10, then 11, and then 21, and then we try printing it. If we try executing this, this will fail. It says val cannot be reassigned. That's because a value is anything that we define with val is immutable, so we can never change its value. Let's remove this so that we don't change the value. And you can see that this prints without any errors. So that's the difference between val and val. There are also a lot of cases immutability becomes very useful, but that's again in more advanced use cases. But now you can just think of that anything that will change over time will be kept as a val. Anything that doesn't change can be kept as a val. Could be things like your university roll number. For 4 years, you're likely to have the same roll number because that's a university roll number and it won't change. But then if you think of your classroom number, that can change over time. So this is how you define and print values. Now, let's say we want to print a pattern. Actually, this will get confusing. Let's say we want to print, okay, it's someone's birthday. So we want to, I would say, draw a number of candles equal to the age. So a candle would look like something like this, maybe. You can just think of this as a candle. Let's see if we can do a better candle. Where's a comma? Yeah, maybe you can think of this as a candle. So another comma. Okay. You can think of this as candles. Now, someone's age is 21. You can actually write, for example, let's print 2 commas here. Let's come to another print. This has to be ln. Now let's see. If we try printing this, okay. Oh, this should be removed. You can see that 2 candles got printed. Now, if someone's age is, for example, 21, It'll be difficult for you to actually print, like manually print out or manually write commas 21 times, then write the vertical bars 21 times. In these cases, you use loops. Now, whenever you're using a loop, you need to know two things. Either a loop you can specify with the number of times you want it to repeat, or you can specify a condition that this will keep printing till a certain condition is met. Let's look at the first type of loops. So here, age is 21, and we want to print 21 candles. So we know the exact number from the beginning itself. We can use this keyword named repeat. And we can pass in a value here. So let's say we say repeat 2, and we want to, I would say, print this, and then say again we do repeat 2. Right. Let's see what ends up happening here. You can see that these commas got printed the first time. Since it's a print ln, it went to the next line, printed these two again. Now repeat, it says twice. So you finish printing this twice. Next, it comes here, prints the same statement twice, but without a print ln. So it prints the first two vertical bars and then the next two vertical bars. Let's try fixing it. So let's make it 1, comma. Let's remove this println because we want to go to the next line only after all the commas have been printed. So let's come here, the println, and let's remove this. Let's try running this and see what happens. Yeah, you have 2 candles. Now you can specify even variables here. So I'm changing this with the age variable. Let's assume the age is 21. You can see that you have printed 21 candles. Very simple. And you can use this to print whatever patterns you want. This is just a small example of candles. You can do much more with it. Maybe you want to print happy birthday equal to the number of times the person's age. So you can print happy birthday 21 times. This is the first kind of loop, where you know exactly the number of times you want the loop to occur. What if you didn't know how many times you want it to occur? Let's say you want to print all the multiples of 3 from 1 to 53. Here, you would manually have to count and figure out how many times a certain number should be printed, right? Because you want to print all the multiples of 3s, but you don't know how many numbers will be there beforehand. I mean, of course, you can calculate on a piece of paper and figure out. Now, in this condition, you will see that I have given some sort of conditions for this logic, that we want to print multiples of 0 till 53. So we want to start from 0, keep printing all the multiples till we reach 53. Or before, once we receive 53, we're supposed to stop because we can't go beyond 53. So this is where the conditions come in. Right. So let's remove this. Whenever you have such conditions, what you can do is, let's say, we define the max as 53. What you can do is use a while loop. And let's say we're starting from 0. Okay. So your maximum value can be up to 53 and the maximum won't change. So I'll define it as a val, and whatever can change, since I is like just a number which will keep increasing. So it will change at every step. We have kept it as val. Now, what I can do here is I'll get a condition that while I is less than equal to 53. So I'm saying that keep changing I let's actually make I change itself. I plus 1. So every time the loop repeats, we tell I that keep incrementing yourself till you reach 53. Now, what we need to do is we are trying to figure out if it's a multiple of 3. So the way you figure out multiples is if a number can be divided by 3 and the remainder is 0, you know it is particularly like it's perfectly divisible. If you take 1 and try dividing it by 3, you can't divide, you will have a remainder of 1. But if you go to 3, 3 divided by 3 leaves a remainder of 0. So you know it's a multiple. The way you do this is use the modulus operator. The modulus operator gives you the remainder after division. So I'm saying if I divide I by 3 and my result is equal to 0, it says that if it doesn't have a remainder, go ahead and print I and put a space after that. Now you can see that we have printed all the multiples of 3 up until 51 because the next multiple is 54, which will be greater than 53. This is a while loop where we have given a condition. Of course, there can be better ways of writing this program as well. So since we're starting with 0, what you can do is you can also get rid of this condition because whenever you want to find a multiple of 3, you will see a pattern here that every time you're just adding 3. So what you can do is instead of doing, you can always increment by 3. And now here you have again printed the same thing, but with little less code. Now this is when you have conditions. What if you want a range? What if you want to print all the numbers between 31 and 40? Let's get rid of this. In that cases, you can use a for loop with something called a range. A range always has a starting value and an ending value. So for I in, to give it a range like 31. This dot is actually a shorthand, like it's a shortcut of saying start from 31, go to 40. You have given a range. You have a minimum and a maximum. And I is just a value that will go across each of these values in that range. Let's print out the values. You can see that you have printed out all the values from 31 to 40. What if you want to print every alternate digit? In that case, you can specify a step size. And instead of always incrementing by 1, increment by 2. So you'll be skipping digits. You can see that you have printed all the odds number here because you're starting with 31, incrementing by 2, incrementing by 2, and going on till you have reached 40. But when it comes to 39, you'll try adding 2, which will become 41, which is outside the range. So 41 won't be printed. Now, this is when you have an ascending range that you start from a lower value and go to a higher value. What if you want it the other way around? In that case, I think this was the syntax. You can see that you went from 40, came to 30. You can use the step size here as well. You reduced from 40 by 2 every time and reach 30. But this is how you can use a range. Now, for example, you had to print, let's say, all the multiples of 5 between 35 and 40. So what you could do is start with 35 or let's not 40, let's say 35 and 100. Since it's a multiple, step size will be 5. And this technically won't do anything because we are saying that go from 31 down to 100, which doesn't make sense. So we'll have to go back to ascending range. And this will print out all the multiples of 5. Now, this is how you iterate over values, like you go over something multiple times. You saw how you can use repeat to repeat a certain set of instructions a given number of times. When you have just conditions, you can use a while loop. And when you have some sort of a range, you can use for loop. You can do some interesting things with this as well. So let's say right, maybe you want to just print a star. It printed a star. Now, what if you want something where, let's try this and see what happens. So I'll go over the range 1 to 5. And for every value of the range, I'll repeat this statement that number of times. Okay, let's just add a new line here. You can see that you could print a pattern. What exactly is happening here is every time I is any of these values, you will repeat this statement that many number of times. So first time it's 1, you repeat it once, print once, go back to a new line. Whenever it is 2, you repeat this twice, this sentence twice, come to a new line. So once, twice, third, fourth, fifth. And you can use this in a bunch of other ways. So you can be very creative with how you want to print patterns. Maybe you can repeat it 4 times to have some sort of a diamond shape. Like you can experiment all you want with this. And this is mainly loops. Now, initially I told you that this is a function. A function is a grouped set of statements that can be reused a lot. Now, let's say you have a function that wishes people happy birthday a lot. And every time you're wishing a different person happy birthday, right? So it might be difficult for you to, like print Helen happy birthday A. Sorry. Now, every time you're wishing a new person, you are just creating a new statement. My bad. If I copy this properly. Right. So every time you want to wish a new person, you would have to, keep repeating this code or keep copy pasting this code. And you can see that almost everything is same here except the name of the person. Perfect place to make a new function. So the way you make a function is use the keyword fun and then give it a name. I'm calling this function wish happy birthday. And I'm starting a function body. Here, I'll just copy paste something like happy birthday, just a happy birthday message. And let's get rid of everything here. Okay, now I'll just call wish happy birthday. The playground is just giving me an autocorrect option, autocomplete option, right? So you can see that instead of having to print this all the time, I'm just calling the function and it's printing out happy birthday every time. Now let's make it more reusable. Let's say we give the function the name of the person and then it wishes that person happy birthday. So the way you give functions is with a parameter. The name of the parameter comes first, followed by the type that you want to send it. A string is just a collection of characters. If you wanted to give it a number, it would be an integer. If you wanted to give it some sort of a decimal point, it would be something like a float or double. Now here, if you remember how we used to print out values with the dollar symbol, right? And if you try compiling this, you will see that it tells you that in these two lines, we didn't pass in the value of name. So let's do that. Let's call the first person A and the second person B. You can see that you have reused some piece of code to do something with just one parameter. Right. Now, you notice that earlier when we didn't give this any sort of a parameter, like the parameter is a value that we pass here, it was giving us an error, like here. Right. But what if you don't want this error to be there? What if you don't pass a name, it by default wishes your own name. So in my case, it would be Subhrajyoti. Right. Let's see if this code executes. It does. So if you see in the third example, I didn't pass in any name and it printed Subhrajyoti. That's because this is a default argument. So whenever you don't pass in any value for this argument, Kotlin will automatically pick up the default value that you have given it. And this comes in very handy when there are some functions that should have default values, and it's okay if you don't pass it a value. If you pass it a value, it will use this. Now, what if we had to write a function that multiply two numbers? Let's say, let's get rid of our happy birthday function. Right? And let's call it fun multiply. Let's give it two values. Both are integers, so I'm using int. And let's say val result, because once you multiply the numbers, the result won't change. I'm making it as a val. I'm calling multiply. I'm passing in 3 and 13. I'm executing this. Nothing happened. That's because we are telling multiply that, hey, do this multiplication. But after that, we're not telling it to do anything. So we are technically doing the multiplication, but we're not using this result anywhere. Right? So what if this function should give back the result? In that case, you use the return keyword and say that this is the value I want to return. And whenever you're telling Kotlin that you will return something, you have to tell the function also that you are returning something. In this case, integer. And this will give us the result of multiplying these two numbers. So let's store it in another variable called result. And then we can finally print result. Yep. So here you can see that inside multiply, we're passing 3 and 13. You're multiplying these two, storing it in a result, returning the result. So now I'm calling this function. It is returning the result into this result keyword and then printing out result. The previous function where you wrote happy birthday, it is performing an action but not returning anything. In this case, we are performing some sort of action and returning a value. And you can use default values here as well. Like let's say both are 1 by default. This won't change anything right now because you're passing in values. Here you chose to give 13. The answer is 13, right? What if, let's say you made this 2, the default value, and you made 3. Let's see what happens. It multiplied 13 with 2 because the functions always care about the order of the arguments. Here A goes first and then B. So what Kotlin thinks is you have passed in the first value 13, which will go to A. B will take the default value. It prints 26. But what if you wanted to tell Kotlin that, hey, this 13 that I'm sending, it's supposed to be B's value and not A. You can use something called a named argument. You can tell Kotlin that, hey, this is the name of the argument and this is the value I'm passing. So let's try executing this. And it's 39. So once you tell Kotlin that I'm setting the value of B, it will assign 13 to B and use the default value of A, multiply, and the answer is 39. So two different ways of using functions. Now, you have an understanding of how different things work in Kotlin, that how you can write functions, how you can return things from functions, how you can print different things, write loops, bunch of things. What if you use something like you wanted to represent some sort of a real life thing, right? Let's say a person. You wanted some piece of code that represents a person. And since it's representing some sort of entity, you would use a class for this. In Kotlin, if you're using a class to represent something which just holds data, you can use something called a data class. Let's name it person. And let's give the person a name. So you'll have a val name of time string. You can have a val age of type integer. Because age is usually an integer, like we say 21, 22, we don't say 21.3 age, right? Now, here you see that I'm always specifying these types. When you are writing something in a sort of a data class description or a function description, you have to pass in the types. But when you're just defining values, for example, val a, here you're specifically telling Kotlin that I'm declaring a value and assigning it, and this is the type integer. Now, Kotlin is pretty smart, and you can skip this part. This will execute just fine. But if you specify a type, you cannot violate it. Here I specify that I'm using an integer, but then I'm passing in a value 3.5. This will give it an error because you're using a float value, which is a decimal value, and trying to make it as an integer, which won't work. But if you didn't use it here, you can see that this works because you haven't told Kotlin what A is supposed to be. Kotlin just assumes that you're giving it 3.5, so it must be a float. Now let's get back to the class. So here you have a class, or rather a data class, which represents a person. You have given it a name and age. The way you define such a person, like let's say person, I'll just call it me. You type in the name of the class, use brackets. So this is called a constructor. So constructor is a special function which you use to create different instances of classes. Here my class is person, and I have to pass in these two values in the constructor. Right. And let's put my age. This should compile. Okay. Now let's print out some statement as well. Let's say now I need to print my name. Now here I could use a dollar. I have to use the instance that I just created, which I named as me. And then I can use these properties to get the values. So I can call me.name. So I'm saying hi with my name. Right. And you can see what ended up happening here is it said hi, it said person with all my details, and then name. That's because when you use a dollar sign, it just interprets whatever is after this and then continues printing as it is. So it figured out what a dollar me is, which is the person object, and then it just did dot name. But we wanted the full thing to be evaluated. So when you want a full block to be evaluated, you can use curly brackets after the dollar. You can see that this prints my name. Now we can print something like your age is 26. Awesome. Now you can use default values here as well. Let's say if no one specifies their age, by default they'll be 3 years old. You can remove the argument here. And my age became 3 because that's the default value. And you can create as many of these as you want. Like let's say I have a friend named Steve, who is almost my age. I'll just copy paste and I'll call this person like friend. I'll just replace wherever I use me with friend. Since my value, I didn't pass a value for my age, I'm still 3 years old. But otherwise, it prints the other person as well. And this way you can use a bunch of different objects. Other thing you can do is you can make these mutable. Let's say, let's make age mutable. So you can change age at any time, right? Let's say I want to change, I want to make Steve old. I'll make Steve 74 years old. You can see that Steve indeed became 74 years old. Now, if this was declared as a val, this wouldn't work because you cannot reinitialize a val. Let's make it a var. And yeah, you can see that you're changing Steve's property, which is the age. You will also see how you actually use this in Android with an example. So we'll move over to the Android part of things now. I hope at least now you would be a bit comfortable with Kotlin. When you see some Kotlin code, you will have some understanding of what's happening. I'll be explaining a lot of the things that you will be seeing inside Android Studio to explain to you how different things are. Let me bring up my Android Studio here. So I'm on the latest version of Android Studio, in stable version, which is Arctic Fox. If you open your Android Studio, you will see this box, and you won't see any of these because these are my recent projects. But then you will see a screen something similar here. One thing you can do is, not here, I always mess this up. Okay, here you can go to this something called Avd Manager. In the Avd Manager, you can see that the different types of devices that you have. Now, here I have a bunch of devices created from you already, but you can use a virtual device, or you can create, or you can use your Android device as well. Like if you have access to a physical device, you can use it. Or if you have a computer, I would say with good specs, like maybe more than 8 GB of RAM, you can use a virtual device as well. So you can click Create Virtual Device, choose the kind of devices you want. It could be a phone, TV, Wear OS is the smart watches that you get, which have Android inbuilt. You have tablets, and you even have automotive. So automotive is what you use on the console systems of car which have Android. That's for Android Auto. Tablets, like Pixel C, you won't get the Samsung tablets emulators here. So you mostly get very generic images, which are usually the Nexus devices or the Pixel devices. Let's go to phone. Let's say you want a Pixel 3 XL. You'll also see this one icon here for the Play Store. It means that Play Store and Google services are installed on this image. For our example, we won't need the Play Store, so let's just go with Pixel 3 XL. Click Next. Here you can see all the different versions of Android that are available. Each version has a code name and a number. So you can see that there's Lollipop, Marshmallow, Nougat, Oreo, Pie, Q, and R. And each of these have these different values. So 29, 30, whatever. The latest version available right now is Android 11. You can also get Android 12 images, but then I think you can get them, but they might not be very stable because it's still in beta. or I think so it's in beta. Anyway, let's say you want to go with Android R. I have Android R downloaded already, so you don't see the download option next here. If I wanted to go, I would have to download queue, but that will take a while. So I'll just go with R. And on the right side, you will see something like this, which is the API level distribution chart. This tells you what is the distribution of different versions of Android across the world. This is updated almost every year with new data that Google collects. This also tells you that if you choose a device with a particular level, what portion of the world uh, does it represent? So let's say if you choose to support your app on devices running Lollipop and above, you will be supporting 98% of the users in the world. If you somehow manage to support Jelly Bean, you will be in almost 100% of the world. It obviously it won't be 100%, be 99 point something, because there will be some devices that are very old but are still running. Newer versions of Android don't have that great a distribution. So if you see something like Android Q and R, they represent some 50% or 51% and 25% of the entire distribution. And the reason choosing these different versions is important is that the lower version you support, the more users you will be making your app available to. But at the same time, a lot of features are available only on recent versions of Android. So if you've used the Messenger app, like the Facebook Messenger app, you would notice that there's this floating chat head. Now, this floating chat head is supported only on certain versions of Android. So if you're creating an app that needs to have this feature, you can't go in very low versions of Android. So there are just a bunch of things. If you would have ordered food on Swiggy or ordered a cab on Ola and minimized the app, you will see a small floating window on your phone. That's for picture-in-picture mode, which is again, I think, supported, I think, around Lollipop or Nougat, around that. So depending upon the features you want, you'll have to be conscious about choosing uh, what kind of Android version you want to support. But since this is a small example, we are going with R, which is the latest version of Android. You can go next and just confirm everything, that what is the name of the device. This will just show you what will be the resolution as well as the screen size, and what is the Android version and the architecture. I'll just skip this part because I already have a lot of devices created. And yeah, mostly whatever you see here are the recent projects. Here you have some options for customizations. Let me bump this up as well so you can see it better. Right. And let's say I want to create a new project. So I click on new project. Okay. Here you get a bunch of options of default templates depending upon what kind of app you want to create. There are all these bunch of things. You can see that there's a scrolling activity, there's settings activity, there's a login screen. So depending upon what you want to create, you can just choose anything. For this example, let's go with empty activity. We won't have anything. Next comes one of the most important parts, choosing the name for your application. Take a while, figure out what you want to name your application. I'll just call it birth. Something seems to be wrong with my keyboard. Oh no, something is wrong with Android Studio. Okay, let's say I want to call it birthday card 20, or I'll just put Steve's name. I want to make a birthday card for Steve. So that's the name of my app. Now there's a package name. A package name uniquely identifies your app. No two apps can have the same package name and also exist on the Play Store at the same time. The way Play Store identifies your app would be using the package name. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say I want to say WhatsApp Play Store. WhatsApp Messenger. If you see the top part of the URL, this page is identified by the package name of WhatsApp. That is com.whatsapp. Let's say if you want to go to a different app, Let's say you want to go to Disney Plus. You can see that it's com.disney.disney Plus. So this is how apps are identified. Google Play doesn't look for your apps by the name. If it wants to identify it, it'll look for those IDs. And you cannot find any other app on the Play Store with this particular package name. That's what's important on how you choose your package names. And usually the way you do this is you write your package in reverse of your domain. So if I have a domain named subhrajyoti.me, it would be me.subhrajyoti. Right. Now, and I'll give it some name. For example, Steve birthday. So I use the reverse of my domain name and I give it the project name. It will also tell you the location of where it will store it. You can choose whether you want to write it in Java or Kotlin, and that according to that, it will generate the files for you. And then you also have the minimum SDK. It's exactly the same thing that we discussed earlier, is what version of Android do you want to support? You can see that I've chosen Android Lollipop, and it supports 98% of devices on Earth. And that's good enough for us. 98% is more than almost what we need. And if you're creating a new app, Android Lollipop is a safe bet because you get a lot of features and you can support a lot of people. Maybe if we want to support a newer version of Android, let's say we chose Marshmallow. It became 94%, but still good. But to be on the safer side, you can support Lollipop onwards. And that's the configuration you need to get your first apps template up and running. Okay. Android Studio is creating a bunch of files for us. Let's give it some time. You can see in the bottom that there's something called a Gradle Build. Gradle is a tool that kind of builds your application. It does a bunch of things. It downloads the libraries which you will need. If you need files from the internet, it'll figure out where all your files are. Can they be compiled together? So Gradle is something that takes care of coordinating everything that's happening in your project. You can build projects without Gradle as well, but Gradle is one of the supported technologies and it has lots of amazing features. So if you're starting out, use Gradle. This is almost done. Yeah, it has finished doing whatever it had to. It's just doing some file indexing. See on the left, you can see that the main things of your Android app. Here you can see the package name, me.subhrajyoti.steve birthday. Some Gradle scripts. Let's take a look at one of them. It says that compile the app with SDK 21. The minimum SDK, sorry, 31. The minimum SDK here is 21, which represents Lollipop. This is the application ID of our app or the package name. Version is 1.0. Version code is 1. And a few other things to help you configure your apps. We won't be taking a look at this file. The two main files we'll be looking at is this main activity.kt and activity underscore main.xml. Here you can see that we have this file called the main activity. It extends from something called app compat activity, which you don't need to bother about right now. What exactly is an activity? An activity is almost any screen that you see on the app. Whenever an application has to run something on your app that you want to see, interact with, that's an activity. You have something called fragments also, but you don't need to bother about them right now. You can just think of activity as anything that you see on your screen from the app is an activity. So activity is a class here in Kotlin. It extends from app compat activity. So it actually gets whatever properties of app compat activity are there. We have this function called onCreate. Don't bother about super.onCreate. The main thing here is set content view, and we're passing this activity underscore main. This file is the same as this file that you're seeing here. So what this tells Android is set content view. So it says that whatever content is there in this activity underscore main file, use that to draw the things for the activity. And remember, I said something about very long comments. If you want to see the source code of any of these commands written anywhere on the studio, you can press Control if you're using a Linux or a Windows system, or Command if you're using a Mac, and then you click on the file. This will open the source code of the file. Here you can see that this is such a long comment. It has multiple lines and it explains what this class is supposed to do and when you're supposed to use it. You can see that this is quite a big line of comment. And you'll see this throughout the app. Like here's a very long comment. Same thing here. So comments can be quite long. Now let's see what exactly is inside my activity underscore main file. Let's go to the file. You can also open the file by going to resources on the left, layout, activity underscore main. Okay. Now here you have 3 tabs. If you see on the top right corner where my cursor is, there is code, there is split, and then there's a design. So design is just to see how your app would, or how your layouts will look. Split is to both have code as well as layout. And code will just give you the code. Right. So let's go to, I would say, design, and let's see how this is previewed. So according to this, I am getting a white screen with some hello world text. Right. Let's try running this. I'll choose a Pixel 3 emulator. There's this green run button here, which I'll click. This will start my emulator. It started on my other monitor. Let me just get it here. So you can see that my emulator is running. First time the app is built and pushed, it takes a while, but consecutively it's faster. Let's give it some time. Seems to be almost done. Awesome. So you can see that the name of our app appears on top and we are getting this text, right? Let's try changing how this text looks. So what you can do is come back to this screen, click on Hello World. And on the left, you can see that that text view got highlighted. So our text view is a class that you use to display some text, right? So we have text view here, and you can see that this text view is a hello world text and it shows up here, right? What you can do is come on the right side, you will see this attributes part, which tells you the different attributes this particular image has. Let's search for something called text. Here we have this text attribute. Let's go ahead and change it to Happy Birthday, Steve. Press enter. And you can see that this text change as well, saying happy birthday. You can change this not just by changing it here. If you go to code, you will see this text got changed to happy birthday, Steve. But you can change it from your activity as well. So I will say define something called happy birthday text view. And I need to figure out a way of accessing the text view, right? So let's go back to our activity. Let's go back to design, or yeah, design should be fine. So every such view that you have, so you have text view, you have other views. So any small thing that you display on the screen is a view. You have text view. Now, all the views in a layout have to be uniquely identifiable by something like a tag or an ID. The ID is the main thing here. If you scroll up, you will see that ID is the first attribute on top. Let's name this birthday message text view. Enter. Let's verify on the code side as well. Yeah, we have added the ID, which is birthday message text view. We can go back to the activity, and here we can use this function called find view by ID. You remember that you have assigned an ID, so you can guess what this particular function does. It's supposed to find a view by its ID. Then you have to give it the type, let's say text view, because this is the type of view we are expecting to get back. And we have to pass in the ID here. We called it, I think, birthday message text view. So now we have access to the text view from the layout, and we can give it a different message. So remember, when we change the age of a person, we use the dot along with the attribute name. Here, I can get the text attribute and change it to no birthday party for you. The text here is still the same. We are not changing the text in XML by changing the thing, the activity. So we can't change the XML file, but we can change how it is displayed. So even though this says happy birthday, Steve, and this says no birthday party for you, let's run this on an emulator and see what happens. It says no birthday party for you. That's because this line loaded the entire view. After it finished loading the screen, we changed the text. So initially it loaded the text with saying happy birthday, Steve, and then it changed to no birthday party for you. Awesome. We don't want to be mean to the person, so let's just remove this piece of code, or if you remember, we can comment it out. Execute this again. It says happy birthday, Steve. Awesome. Let's go back to our activity and let's change how this text looks. Go to design. Now, if you zoom out here, you can see that this text is very small. So first thing you can do is change the size. Click on this text. Scroll down till you see something which says text size or something with size. So it will give you an idea that this might be changing the size of the characters that you have. If you scroll, I think we should read something called text size. Okay, yeah, we found text size. Here, we have to give a certain number and a unit. So what unit you use for anything that's text is SP, which stands for scaled pixels. Let's say you want to give it 21 SP. Press enter. Significantly increased, but maybe a little more. 24 SP. Looks better. You also want to change the text color. So let's go here. Let's search for text color. Here. Click on this color that you see here. It'll open up a color picker. Let's say we want to wish Steve in red color. And you can see that this changed as well. Great. We have changed the text size. Let's print this, not print, I would say. Let's run this on a device and see if it's actually working. It is working. Awesome. Let's try adding your name as well since you're wishing them. And let's try changing this to the top left. What you can do is just hold this, drag it to the position you want. We have happy birthday Steve here. And we want to add a name to the bottom right. So on this left side, you can see something called a pellet. A pellet has these different types of views that you commonly use, which you can just drag and drop. Let's say if you go to text, we have a text view. You can drag it here. First thing we have to do always is give this view an ID. By default, it is text view, but let's say you call it visual name text view. But it's easy to remember rather than just saying that text view. We should name text view. Okay. Let's go change it to our name. Or rather, let's say from. Okay. Let's try getting it down a bit. Okay. And now let's try changing the size of the text from the XML code. So let's look for, yeah, we found text view. Let's say text size, you can start typing and it will autocomplete. So text size, uh, maybe not too big. So let's make it 21 SP. And let's say text color. Let's copy the same text color we had earlier, which is this. You can see that this is a hexadecimal string. So that's what we use to represent colors on Android. Awesome. Let's go back to design and see how this looks. Okay, my name is getting cut, so I'll just go a bit front. Let's execute this. You can see that even though we put from Subhrajyoti towards the bottom right, it actually went to the top left. Let's see what happened here. If you go here, you will notice that there are this circles which are actually empty. And you also have this red color symbol telling you something is wrong. It says missing constraints in constraint layout, right? So the problem here is that we are kind of telling Android key keep this somewhere. We're not giving it too much information on how to figure out where to keep it. Right. So let's say we want the end of this text view to go till the end of the screen. So what you can do is you can click and drag the arrow, go to the screen. Similarly, the lower arrow you can drag and put at the bottom of the screen. You can say that this is too close to the edge. So you can click on this. Come here in the where you can see these 4 different directions. For the right side, I'll say, give me a spacing of 27 dp. dp is density dependent pixel. So once you put the value of 20, you can see that this text is little to the left. It got moved to the left. So I said, put a space of 20 dp on the right side. So technically it moved to the left. If you want to move it up, we'll have to give some space at the bottom. Let's make it 32 dp. Looks much better. Let's see if this actually works by running it on the emulator. And there you go. You have the name you're wishing the person, and you have your own name as well. But this doesn't really look that much of a birth record. It's still very bland. Let's add an image to it. You can head over to your browser, go to this URL, bit.ly/Android cake. I'll share this on Google Meet as well. So you can just go to the same link. I will go here as well. You can just click on download image, and this will open up in a new tab. Right click, save image. I'll store it in my documents called Android Party. It's downloaded. Awesome. Let's go back to Android Studio. Now, if you remember, initially I told you about this resource directory, RES. RES stands for resource. Now, inside resources, you can have layouts like the one you're seeing right now. You can have drawables. Drawables basically are files that helps Android draw things. It could be drawing an image, could be drawing a shape, a bunch of things. Then you have things like strings that you're using, all the text that you want to show in your app. What are the colors being used? A bunch of things go inside resources. Let's expand drawable. And let's open up our file manager as well. Here we have Android Party. drag this image into this drawable folder. Now here, it's showing this directory called drawable-v24. So v24 is a directory where you should place those images that should only be available on API version 24 and above, like Android API version 24 and above. But we want our text or these images to be available from our minimum Android version, which is 21 for our case. So we'll just remove this part and let's see. Okay, yeah, we can just remove this part. We'll go to inside drawable. Let's click refactor. And yeah, it's inside this particular directory. Now, what you can do is, let's see, you have text. I don't think so. It will be in text. Let's go to widgets. Yeah, we have image view. Drag and drop an image view here. It'll ask you for a source for the image view. You can just choose this. Click OK. Right. It's kind of disturbed. I would say not disturbed. It's kind of like not in correct place. So let's do the same thing we did for the text views, where we gave it the different constraints for different places. So let's say the top of the image view should go to the top of the screen, left should go to left, right should go to right, and the bottom of the image should go to the bottom. Cool. But this still looks kind of okayish, like the cake is at the center, there's some white spacing on top and bottom. How do you fix this? Every image has this thing called a scale type. If you scroll down, you can see this thing called a scale type for this particular image. If you don't see it, you have to make sure that you are actually clicked on the image view. You have these different views here. Based on what you click or what you select here, there will be different attributes to the right. So make sure on the image view. And here, you can see this thing called a scale type. If you click on the drop down, you see a bunch of scale types. Let's say if you go say fit start, it'll fit it to the starting of the page. Fit end will take it to the end of the page. But we want something where it has to not, I would say, stretch the image to the full screen, but it will keep it at the center. Okay. Center crop is actually good for such scenarios where it kind of fits the screen and it is, the image doesn't look bad. It's at the center and it has taken up the full screen. But our text actually has disappeared. That's because the way we told Android to draw everything is keep the text and on top draw the image, because that's the order we have given it. Right now, if we want the text to actually appear, we can just change the order by dragging these. Give me one moment. I'll just mute myself. I'll just be back. Yeah. So back at this screen, all I did was actually adjust. I'm unmuted. I adjusted this image view to be at the top of the order. So this tells Android that first draw the image, then on top, draw this text that I'm giving you. Let's try executing this code. Let's go to my emulator here. And yeah, this looks like a much better app. You have a nice cupcake being shown here, some balloons, candles, etc. in the background, some sparkles, and then you have the text. You can, again, change the color of the text, make it larger, and a bunch of other things. Now, there isn't much interaction with the app. Let's try adding that as well. The easiest way of interacting with an app is adding a button. Let's do that. There's a button section in the palette. Go to button, drag a button here. Let's give the button an ID. Let's say, or let's just change the name, text of the button, and then we can see what we can give the ID. So once we're in the button, for a change, let's go to code and change the text of the button. So you have the button, it says text button. Let's say, can you drive? If a friend has a birthday and they've just been 18 or they're 19, they can technically get a driver's license. So let's just add a button which you can click and figure out whether the person can drive or not. So you have changed the text to drive. Here you have the ID as well. Let's change it to let's call it can drive button. Go back to design. You can see that the text for the button has changed. We need to actually figure out a way of keeping this in the center. But if you remember, just dragging it won't do. We also have to specify how it should be laid out for the rest of the page. So we can say that the right should be aligned to the right, the left should be aligned to the left. So once you have aligned both the sides, it basically ends up centering it. Align to the bottom, but then this is too low. So let's click on this. Let's make this 32, which is still small. Let's make it 64. Might be better. Much better. So we have this button saying, can you drive? Now you want to add something that can listen for clicks on this button. We'll see how we can do that. Go back to your main activity. Similar to how you got access to the text view, you can get access to the button. Let's name the button. Can you drive button? We have to find view by ID. Here the type will be button r.id dot and drive button. So now we have access to the button. Then you can do can you drive dot set on click listener. And this gives you this block, which will be executed only when the button is clicked. Okay, now you want to figure out can your friend drive or not? Right. So let's define a class for my friend. Let's say data class friend. The friend has a name and the friend also has an age. Okay. Now let's define a friend here. And Steve equal to friend. Passing the parameters. Each name is Steve, of course. Let's say Steve is 17 years old. We just keep randomly changing Steve's age. Okay. Now, another thing that you can do with Kotlin and also all other languages is having conditional statements where if a certain condition is true, you execute something, and if a certain condition is false, you do something else. This comes with an if condition. Right. Now, the way we are talking itself is if Steve is greater than 17 years old or 18 years old, he can drive. Otherwise, he cannot. Right. So what I can do is if Steve, I start with an if block. I mean, if then in brackets, Steve.age greater than or equal to 18. Then I'm just putting a comment here that say Steve can drive. Otherwise, so else is saying if this happens, otherwise do that. Steve can't drive. Okay. Now we need a way of showing this output to the user that Steve cannot drive or Steve can drive. You remember that we use print and println statements. You cannot use that to display messages to the user on Android. If you use print and print ln, it will print to an output, but not to the screen. Internally, it will just keep printing this somewhere. One way of showing a message to the user is something called a toast. The way you start a toast is toast.make text. You have to give something called a context. You don't need to bother about context right now. You can say this. We have to pass in the message that you want to show the user. Steve can drive. And the last is the duration. There are two types of duration: short and long. Let's say short, length short. If Steve can drive, we'll just show a message. And then finally, you have to call show. So this shows the message to the user. In the else block, we just paste the same thing, but we can say Steve can't drive. And let's change this length to long. We want to show this message for a longer duration that Steve cannot drive. Right. So let's execute this code. Okay, the app looks fine. We have the Can You Drive button. Let's click on it. It says Steve can't drive. Haha. That's because we mentioned Steve's age is 17. So if you think of this if condition checks if 17 is greater than equal to 18, which is not correct. So it goes to the else block. Now, if we make Steve's age as 71 and execute the code again, let's click on Can You Drive? And now Steve can drive. So this is how you can interact with a button and show different kinds of messages to the user. But you can do much more as well. Let's comment this part out so that we can start using this. We don't want to change the text here. Let's say if Steve cannot drive, we want to change a message to say, happy birthday, Steve, but you still can't drive. What we can do here is use happy birthday text view that we had earlier created, dot text, and we can pass a string message here. Happy birthday, Steve, but you still can't drive. Let's just add a small emoji to make it fun. Now let's execute this. Go back to emulator. It says Steve can drive because I forgot to change Steve's age. Let's make Steve 3 years old now. Let's check if Steve can drive. Steve can't drive, and you can see that the text at the top changed as well. Now you can see that based on these different conditions, we are showing messages to the user, we are changing UI elements. So based on interactions, you can do a bunch of things. Maybe you had another field where you could enter Steve's age every time and then check if Steve could drive or not. Instead of having to add Steve's age inside the code and every time we relaunch the app, you can have a small field where you ask for Steve's age and then see whether Steve can drive or not. So this is it for this session. In the next session, we'll see how you can take different types of inputs from the user. Like maybe you can modify this to ask for Steve's age, or you ask for a few values and do mathematical operations on them. How you can use different kinds of views in your layouts and much more. Also a little more complex app. So this is just a one screen app, how you can change things in your app. So all these are for the next sessions. If you have any doubts for this session, I'll be happy to take them now.
Thank you so much,
I'm looking.
Subhrajyoti.
Yeah. I'll stop
Yes,
sharing my
guys.
screen.
If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box. Though, by the way, the next session is scheduled for tomorrow. Uh, we'll see more complex usages, like he said, and we'll advance more further into this topic.
Is Kotlin okay? So there's a question asking, is Kotlin enough, or we need to learn Java also? If you're starting to write code right now, just for coding Android apps, you don't need to know Java. Kotlin is a very good place to start. And once you write Kotlin, once you write it enough, you will be able to read most of Java code. Like, for example, you saw that whenever I was declaring a value, I was writing the name of the value first and then the type of the value. In Java, it's the reverse. So it would, instead of saying val a of type string equal to 10 or equal to maybe hello world, it would say string text equal to hello world. So a lot of things are very readable. When you're calling a function, you're using the name of the function with parameters passed to it. So a bunch of things are common. You can learn just Kotlin right now to work with apps. You will be able to understand a lot. And Java is fairly like once you, I would say, are thorough with Kotlin. If you ever need to write in Java, it'll just take you some time to just figure out how the syntax works. But learning Kotlin is enough. Timing for tomorrow's sessions, I think your host can confirm that.
Yeah, guys, the timing for the next session will be announced on our social media handles of GDSC. Yeah,
You
Rudra,
think?
your this will be uploaded to the YouTube handle of GDSC-GU.
What are some? Okay, there's a question asking what are some good beginner projects to start with in Kotlin. So if you're just thinking of projects and not just our Android apps, you can write Kotlin programs to do a bunch of things, right? If you just want to write just code without any UI, you can just recreate a calculator where you can have all these different functions for different types of calculations, and you call all of these different functions. If you want to go more complex, maybe you can write something that does a repetitive tasks for you. Maybe it does some calculations for you. If you want to go more complex, maybe download some data from the internet. Like if I give my PIN code, return to me the weather for this current PIN code. So you can download some data from the internet, go through the data, and then tell the user. If you want to make some, once you have understanding of how that works, you can translate it to Android as well, where an app launches, you give it a PIN code, press enter, or press return, and then you get the data for your particular PIN code. Uh, what about okay? The next question is what about other languages like Flutter or Dart? How do they compare to Kotlin and Java? Okay, so Dart, from what I have seen, is mainly used in the context of Flutter only. I haven't seen applications of Dart for other use cases. So if you're working with Flutter, you'll have to know Dart. But if you think of languages like Kotlin and Java, I mean, Java again is, I would say, has been around for a really long time. So it's been decades and decades that Java has been around. So you can use it for a bunch of things like server-side applications, mobile applications, bunch of things. And Kotlin again is used for, again, like I mentioned, desktop apps, Mac OS apps. Like you can do so much more with it. Uh, the next question was, can you share some good resources to start with Kotlin? You can go to the Kotlin language documentation. I think it's called kotlin.org or kotlinlang.org. But you can just search for Kotlin documentation, and they have really good documentation on how you can go step by step, like learning how to declare values, printing statements, writing methods. Also, Google has these things called code labs, which you can follow along. So you can just search for Kotlin code lab. You will find the links from Google, which take you step by step on the different things you need to know about Kotlin. There's a question on, I know a bit of Java. Should I learn Kotlin or start with Java? Now, I would say it depends on what you're trying to do. If you just want to, I would say, get better at Java, go ahead. Like, there's so much more you can do with Java. You can write UI applications, you can write server-side code, like you can create some sort of an API server whenever you pass in again a pin code. It looks on the internet for the weather data for the pin code and returns it to you, that you can display on a website. You can create things. So if you want to learn more about Java, go ahead. You technically don't need to learn Kotlin. But then if you are planning on becoming an Android developer, you can still continue with Java, but knowing Kotlin will be very helpful to you. It will make a lot of uh, your things simpler. And also, most apps in the world right now use Kotlin. So it'll be very easy for you to understand things as well. I'm not saying ignore Java ever, because there are a lot of Android apps that will still use Java. So if you already have pre-existing knowledge of Java, good for you. If you want to explore more of Java, go ahead. It's not like you have to learn Kotlin. If at some point you've written a lot of Java and you feel like, okay, you want to learn something that's, I would say, syntactically much better to look at and understand, go with Kotlin. If you want to like particularly focus on something like Android, then learning Kotlin will be very helpful for you. Share your thoughts. Okay, the next question is, share your thoughts about Kotlin and career prospects. A good question. Uh, I have been writing Android apps in Kotlin for companies for the last 3 years. So Kotlin, I would say, still relatively new compared to languages like Java, Python, etc. But bunch of companies out there are using it. Most of the major companies are using Kotlin, at least on the Android apps. There are lots of companies out there that use Kotlin on the server side as well. So there are a bunch of startups that use it, or even if you think of bigger corporations, for example, like Target, if you have heard of it, they use Kotlin for their backend projects. A bunch of companies are using Kotlin for backend projects, but I would say the main application of Kotlin has been on Android apps. So career perspectives, if you know Kotlin, Android jobs are a good bet for you, and you can also get into backend jobs. So career prospect wise, Kotlin is great. Like, and if you still want some more proof of that, Kotlin has a Slack channel called Kotlin Line Slack. You can join that, and there's a dedicated hiring page just for Kotlin jobs, and you will see posts there every 2-3 days. And there's just people who want to actively post there. You can go on any job website, like for example, you can go to LinkedIn, search and type Kotlin job. You will see the number of applications or the number of job openings that exist which have Kotlin as one of the good to haves or a requirement. Like, career prospects are amazing. If somebody is already doing DSA with Java and also projects, should she switch to Kotlin or give it a try? You don't need to switch to Kotlin, like especially if you're doing DSA. Uh, it's almost the same, right? Your syntax becomes a bit better. But with DSA, the main thing again is learning your data structures and not just the language you use in. So you can continue going with Java. You can give Kotlin a try. Because the thing is, Kotlin is such a nicely made language that once you write Kotlin for enough time, you won't feel like going back to Java. Simple example. In Kotlin, you don't have to put a semicolon at the end of the statement. You can just go to the next line and continue coding. That's not the case with Java, because every time you have to remember to put the semicolon. And a lot of things are just shorter code in Kotlin. So you can give it a try. If you like it, I'm sure you will stay with Kotlin. If you don't like it, I mean, you can always go back to Java. It's the switch between them is hardly any deal. Like, I from my on my day job, from time to time I write some code in Java, some code in Kotlin, and it's not much of an extra load because they're so similar. It's very easy for you to switch between them. Not for DSA, but for projects. I would say if you're working on a project, try writing a little bit of it in Kotlin. Like, get a taste of Kotlin. See if you like it, stay. It's not necessary that you have to move to Kotlin. If your project is using Java, continue using it. Okay, as someone who has been in the industry, how does app development in personal projects compare to the commercial app development? Okay, uh, that's a really good question. Now, once you're thinking of commercial apps, right? If you have a personal project, it might just run on your Android device, your friends, and maybe a few other people. So very simple example, like when you're designing something, you'll be designing for it to work on your screen and your friend's screens, right? It would work on a bunch of screens. But once you do commercial development, your users can have any sort of screen starting from 3.5, 4 inches up until like 6, 7 inches. So that's one thing. They can be on a variety of Android devices. They will be in a variety of different types of Android devices, like could be a Xiaomi device, the manufacturers change. So there are lots of things you have to account for different devices. You have to figure out how do you monitor crashes. Like if it crashes for your device on your personal project, you'll connect to device and fix it. But what if you deployed an app to the world? You have a user in Argentina, the app is crashing. You have to figure out how to debug that crash. Uh, is there a way of, I would say, preventing that user from accessing that part of code? Uh, Commercial apps are much bigger compared to a personal project. Your personal project might have 5 screens, 6 screens, might have a few thousand lines of codes. A commercial app would have billions of lines of code, maybe 6, 7 lakhs, sometimes millions. There'll be lots of classes. So the way you structure your project becomes very important because you will keep getting requirements from different people in the company that this is what we need. You'll have user requirements. So you'll have to structure your code in such a way that it's easy for you to add new features in the future. Which database should we learn according to you for Android development? Android has support for a bunch of database types, but learn about MySQL, how to write MySQL queries and things like that. They'll come in very handy for Android. I haven't seen people use other types of databases. There are things like Firebase Data Store and other things, but almost majority uses SQLite, which again is SQL. So you can just learn how to write queries and a few things in MySQL, and you're good to go. I specialize in machine learning. What opportunities do I have if I start with Android dev? When you're asking about opportunities, are you like looking for some sort of intersection between machine learning and Android development, or do you want to make a complete switch? The answer varies depending on that. Uh, yes, intersection. Yes, I would say there is opportunities, but then it's quite a niche. So I wouldn't say too many opportunities. But then there are opportunities because a lot of apps these days do on-device machine learning. So they use, if I'm not wrong, TensorFlow Lite, which can generate models that run on Android. I mean, on devices. So there are a bunch of things. I mean, there is some intersection, but I wouldn't say that there are too many apps out there that are doing it. So it's pretty niche. Uh, you can get opportunities, but then it might be difficult to get those opportunities.
Thank you so much, Subhrajyoti Sen sir. I guess this session would come to an end, and we thank you a lot on the behalf of GDSC-GU for taking out time and giving such an informative session. We shall see you for the next session, hopefully, and
Yeah.
yeah, let's take care and stay healthy, stay safe. To
Thanks for
everyone
inviting
who
me.
would like, yeah, yeah. To everyone who would like to explore further, there is a link that will be posted in the chat box. Go ahead, explore, and try to learn for the next session. There will be 2 more sessions after this, and we'll be holding some offline meet also for this, and we'll keep you posted on that on our social handles. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You guys, everyone can leave the meeting now.